Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Audio Cycling YouTube channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at the World Championships road race at the Velogames. Obviously you can tell I'm in a new setting. I have moved to start my PhD. It's been induction week this week, so officially starting next week, but what's starting on Sunday is the World Champs, and it's a bit of a tricky one to make, I suppose. It depends just how clever you want to try and be in your team making, but at the end of the day, I'm expecting a lot of people to take Pogacar because he is the big favourite for this race. He looked very good in Montreal, which is a very, very similar to this race, actually, in terms of how the climbs are, in terms of length and difficulty and gradients. So I think Poggy is ultimately the big favourite for this race. I think it's very brave to go without him in this race, although some people might decide to try and do so, to try and create a really intricately created team with, not including the kind of big favourites, but the second and third tier favourites. But you might have a bit of a decision between Pogacar and Van der Poel for sure. Certainly there's been a lot of talk about Van der Poel losing weight specifically for this race to try and be competitive, and he looked very good at the Tour of Luxembourg, really, really strong there. So I won't count out Van der Poel at all in this race. I think the sensible move is likely to take two of these top three riders. I'm expecting a lot of them to be Pogacar and Evenepoel, but I think Van der Poel will be the least selected of the three, and maybe that could give you a good differential if you're planning on making a bit of a crazy curveball move to try and move up the rankings. I'm not really planning on doing that. I'm like 13th in the world at the moment, and I'm just trying to kind of chip my way upwards rather than making a big power play. But if you got nothing to lose, then by all means go with Van der Poel, and of course Evenepoel as well. I think he's probably like third favourite or second favourite behind Pogacar. He's a really, really big favourite for this race. I think the thing which gives these three the big advantage, and why I say you should probably take two of them, is because you get those breakaway points at 20 kilometres to go and 10 kilometres to go. And when you bear in mind that 20 kilometres to go is pretty much bang on the top of the last climb of the last descent of that Viticom climb. So anybody who's away at that point will be getting extra points, which I see as likely being Poggy and Evenepoel, or Van der Poel in there as well. So that's why those people make sense, because you get 60 points at each of those marks. So that means that if they were to then go on to fight for victory, they'd get 120 because they'd collect those ones at 10 kilometres to go as well. Then you got a lot of riders who I'm not too sure about. I'm not, honestly, Pedersen, Roglic, I think these are just guys who are really here as domestiques more than likely. I'm just not sure about Roglic. I would much rather Pogacar. If I was selecting who the leader's going to be, I'd say it would be Poggy. I think Roglic is there to keep things together in the chaotic finale that there's likely going to be. And Pedersen, I think, is working for Skelmos Jensen because Skelmos Jensen worked for him in the Olympics. They've got a little bit of a handshake agreement on that. Hirschi, the man in form, he's actually scored the second most points of anybody in the Super Classico when you look at the rider standings. I think Hirschi, he's a good choice. Why not? Trying to go with him, Poggy, and Evenepoel is quite tricky. You get a couple of 4s and a 6 in there, and the team doesn't look quite right. So Hirschi might be a hard one to fit in unless you sacrifice one of Pogacar or Evenepoel, but I'm not sure how many people would really want to do that. Like, no offence to Hirschi, he's a great pick, but he's just in this awkward price range, I think, at 24 credits. So we'll wait and see how many people go with him. Pidcock, we haven't seen much of since he just DNF'd the Tour of Britain, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of Pidcock pickers. I wouldn't be picking him at the same price. I'd much prefer to pick Hirschi. So Pidcock I can't wholeheartedly recommend. The 22 credit riders, I really like Alaphilippe. He's really good on these longer, big stage kind of one-day races where the stakes are really high, and I think Alaphilippe's really good on those sorts of days. I think that Jorgensen's pretty decent for a top 10. I think Madouas, probably like a top 15 more than likely. His last few results in his races haven't been too confidence-inducing. Maybe that's just him trying to prepare in his own specific way for the World Champs. I don't know, but I would probably say that Alaphilippe might be a little bit of a safer choice. out of the two of them. Michael Matthews will probably end up in some second or third group fighting out for some minor placings around the top 10, I would suggest. Paulus, they seem to suggest in their kind of press release to US that they need to use their strength in numbers, so who knows? It could be Paulus, it could be McNulty, it could be Jorgensen, it could be Kevin Vermarker even. So maybe you get to spread yourself a bit thin if you go with the US. You're kind of fighting a losing battle on the statistics because you're picking a rider out of like 4 people as opposed to maybe like an out-and-out leader or somebody who's more confirmed, a bit more like Alaphilippe, who's more likely to be an out-and-out team leader. And yeah, I don't know. Benoit, I think, is a domestique. Gourmet, I don't think stands much of a chance. Adam Yates, yeah, like he wasn't that great in the Vuelta, and I'm not sure how much I rate him as a one-day racer, even if he did win Montreal last year. So maybe that's something going in his favour. He does sort of suit this style of racing, but I just don't know who GB will be going for. I think it would be Pidcock, but I think maybe Yates would just be such a risk for you to be going with. Like, it'll be an incredible differential for you to try and get some different riders in there, but it'll be really, really bold of you to do it. Into the 20 credit riders, we're starting to get a lot of the Spanish riders in here, which just, before I even get onto any of them, they're all pretty much good picks. It's just really hard to know who is going to be their leader, so you're pretty much going to be hearing a lot of the same about. Arambarou in theory is their fastest kind of finisher, although there's Roger Adelia, who you could argue is about the same speed. Obviously, these two went head-to-head in the Grand Prix de Wallonie, and Adelia came out on top there. I think Arambarou, yeah, he suits this race for sure. The descent finish is good as well. He's very good technically, and he's just got to hang on, basically, is all he's got to do, and then sprint at the end. I definitely think Arambarou could be a top 10 finisher, so long as the groups kind of come back together and it eases up. I think Arambarou could be a good one. You got a Yuzo in here as well. I don't really know if I'd go with a Yuzo. He was good in Luxembourg, yes, but that was largely because of the TT that he was so high up in GC. So maybe you might want to go with him. He's a little bit of a rogue pick as well. I just don't know who Spain will be going with. Baggioli was alright in Montreal. I think he was 15th or something like that. I don't know who Italy would be riding for. Again, they're a bit like Spain. They've got a lot of options they could go with. But in theory, Baggioli could be a big surprise. I think another big differential you could be going with is to go with somebody like Baggioli over maybe more of a namestay pick like a Healy or a Skelmos Jensen, which some people will more likely go with because they're just a bit safer. I mean, speaking of which, Healy and Skelmos Jensen, honestly, I don't think Healy's looked that great recently. I'd probably be avoiding him. Kung, although he's climbing really, really well in the Vuelta, I think they'll be going with Hershey or Schmid. So I think Kung, probably just a domestique. Mass, not much of a one-day racer, personally, I don't think. But he did have a really good Vuelta, so maybe he can do something. Skelmos Jensen crashed out of Luxembourg. The teams say that won't be hampering his World Champs prep, but I don't get why they'd say that the contrary to that. That just wouldn't really make sense. And the other guys, Tranek, Vlasov, Velens, Stuyven, it's just a lot of domestiques really who are really expensive. Woods maybe you could provide an argument for as well, or Simon Yates as well. He might try and do something, but a bit like Adam Yates, I'm never quite sure how to gauge just how well they can do in one-day races. They seem to have one good one-day race in every 10 that they compete in. Woods, yeah, for sure. He could be a top 15, absolutely. 18 credit riders, Bilbao, again, the Spain thing all over again. Bilbao, you got Landa, they're both good. Bilbao was second in Montreal, so a little bit more confidence for Bilbao as a pick. Gaudu, super strong during Luxembourg. I think he'll be very much involved in the race, and I think that he could be a top 10 if he gets into the right moves. And Ulissi could be a leader for Italy, but like I said, it's very similar with Spain. You don't know who they're going to be going with, so it's really your guess is as good as mine when it comes to that. So there's quite a few good ones in the 18s. Maybe Bilbao, I think, edges it as my favourite one. The 16s, Bardet in his last World Champs. I think he'll be likely just a domestique for somebody like Alaphilippe or Madouas. But maybe he could get into some early moves. It's very possible he could definitely finish top 20. Tobias Harlan, Johannesson, the leader for Norway, absolutely. I pretty much could guarantee that that will be the case. But yeah, kind of always seems to fall short in one-day races. Not really too sure why, so not too much confidence in him. McNulty, yeah, he didn't do as great in the TT as I thought he would do. I think that was probably the case with everybody kind of thought that. But yeah, McNulty, not much of a one-day racer, although he has done decently in some of them earlier this year, especially in a lot of the Spanish kind of Mallorca challenges. But I think they'd go with, again, like I said earlier, the US have like 4 leaders or something similar to that, so I'm not sure which one they will be deciding to go with. Honestly, to cut to the chase, I think your best 16 credit riders are Tom Schoens and Maxime van Hils. I think Schoens has just got this real never say die attitude where he'll just keep going and he'll just keep attacking off the front. I don't think he'll be able to follow Poggi and Remco, but I think he could be in that second group and fighting for a top 10, absolutely. And I think Van Hils is the same, although Van Hils has the slight advantage where if Remco finishes on the podium, he will get assist points in there as well. So slight favouring towards Van Hils possibly with that. And I would say, yeah, they're easily the best ones. The 14 credit riders, I would say you've got Santiago Boitrago for sure. Yeah, he could be a leader for Colombia. I'm not sure who they'd go with otherwise. Schmid, absolutely. I think he was looking so good at the end of the Vuelta, and I think that him and Hershey will be a super strong pairing. I'm honestly, yeah, the other 14's not that much of a fan of. Into the 12s, you've got a lot of the Belgian guys in here. You've also got some Australians. I would say that the Belgian guys, these are all just domestiques, so I'd probably not pick those guys. Australia have Jai Hindley and O'Connor in here, the more climbing options. Of course, they've got Michael Matthews as their sprint reserve, I guess you'd say. Hindley and O'Connor will be more attacking options. O'Connor was very good in the Vuelta. Hindley was pretty good in Montreal. He was just outside the top 10 there. So I think that both of those guys have got good chances of finishing in the top 15 or maybe in a top 10 if they get, again, into the right kind of move. And yeah, Mollard will be a domestique. I think Schachmann only seems to do well in TTs nowadays for whatever reason. And the other ones just, yeah, don't really tick on my fancy. And into the 10s, Aliotti. Again, you don't know who Italy will be going with, but Aliotti, you may as well throw his name into the ring as well. Kelderman he's been, you know, he was okay in Luxembourg and he was okay in the Canadian races, and maybe he'll get assist points on Van der Poel. But Vermarker and Williams are probably the best ones in theory. Vermarker was very good in like the mid-season around like the Norwegian, like Tour of Norway, in San Sebastian, in the Deutschland Tour as well, but then kind of dropped off and didn't do as well in the Canadian races. Again, I don't know if that's just part of his prep and he was never really intending to do well there. But Vermarker in theory is a very good value pick at 10. And so is Williams, although very similarly. He did great in the Tour of Britain, but then didn't do anything in the Canadian races. And again, I'm not sure how much to read into that, but it does put a little bit of a question in my mind as to whether he is actually in good shape or whether it was just, I don't know, maybe he was just like the jet lag, or he might have felt a little bit under the weather, like who knows. There could be any number of reasons why he didn't do well in those Canadian races, so maybe it's a little bit too much to read into that. Into the 8 credits, obviously you've got Roger Adlia. I think he'll be pretty well selected after winning the Grand Prix de Wallonie and finishing 5th in the Super 8 Classic. He's clearly in good form, and I think I'd be surprised if he was outside the top 20. G, yeah, maybe he could do something, but again, not that great in the Canadian races, so maybe that's a little bit of a sign that he's not doing too well. Bart Lemon, very, very good in the Tour of Luxembourg, and I think that him, you know, he's got the possibility of the assist points on Van der Poel, looking really strong. He could be a top 25 and assist points. I think that's not a bad one to be going with. Oscar Onley, again, not sure who Great Britain are going with. It might be Pidcock, it might be Williams, it might be the Yateses, but Onley was very good in the Tour of Britain, and I think that he suits this style of racing, even if he hasn't got that many good one-day results. But I think that's just because he hasn't done that many one-day races. So maybe he could be a bit of a surprise. Again, a good differential if you need it. Tahad is a good puncher for Colombia. Him and Boitrago I like as a good combination. But I honestly think I know some people are going to not like me for this, but Antonio Tiberi, the cat killer, is actually quite a good choice because he just won the Tour of Luxembourg. He was looking pretty good, and yeah, I know some people won't pick him because of what he's done, but yeah, you kind of have to mention that he has won. He is looking in good shape, so yeah, I thought I'd just mention his name quickly and move on. Into the sixes, we've got Pablo Castillo, 2 stages at the Vuelta a España. Not sure how he goes over one-day races. I expect that other people in the Spanish team will be ahead of him. That's just the long and short of it. You've got Jefferson Alvaro Cepeda, the more puncher style of the 2 Cepedas. He's had some decent results this year. Brabant Cepel, Donostia, San Sebastian. He's been good in both of those, and absolutely you could go with him. And also, a lot of these 6s aren't that great. Maybe Leknesund for a bit of a long-range attack, but honestly, I can't remember the last time I remember Leknesund was in a race, to be honest. Sounds kind of bad to say. Lipovitz, I think, is my favourite, just because Germany don't have a big leader, and he was very good in the Vuelta. Seems to go better on the shallower gradient climbs, which is what you are going to be seeing a bit more of in this race. So I think Lipovitz is really good. And yeah, other than him, you might go with Frank Vandenbroek for the assist points on Vanderpool, and yeah, he's a good climber. Maybe you could get something out of him. Or maybe Warndal as well. He was okay in the Canadian races as well. So yeah, maybe he might be top 30, possibly. And then into the 4s, unfortunately, there's nobody here who I really see as assist point getters. There's no like Belgians, there's no Slovenians. So I don't know who you'd be going for in assist points, but in terms of potential people to get a top 30, maybe Marco Brenner you might look towards. You might also get a result out of, where is it, Archie Ryan, probably the best one, I'd say, in terms of results. Or maybe even Thomas Guillermo Silva you could go with. He's been very good in a lot of Spanish one-day races and the Italian one-day races recently, but obviously this is a step up in race quality, so maybe he might be a little bit of a too brave of a pick to be going with. So I'd say Archie Ryan and Brenner are your best ones. Obviously, I misclicked onto there. This is my team at the moment. We've got Poggi and Evenepoel. I'm between Van Hills and Schoens. It could be either one of them. So that's kind of a 50-50 decision, but I'm going with Van Hills at the moment based upon the assist points which he might get for Evenepoel. And then I've got Tiberi, Lipovitz and Adlia. Obviously, could swap Tiberi and Adlia for any of the other 8s that I said, like Oscar Onley, for example, I might go with, or Bart Lemon. And then Lipovitz, I think, is the best 6. You could swap something around if you didn't want to, say, go with Evenepoel for whatever reason, and that might be. And you could swap him to Alaphilippe, or maybe you might want Schoens in here, and then you save 16 credits, and you could put those onto Tiberi to get yourself Alaphilippe. So you could go something like that, where you spread it out a little bit more. Or obviously you could go a step further and take out Pogacar as well, and you could go with an even wilder team where you go with Bilbao in there, and then you can get a Delia up to, I don't know, Jorgensen. So something even crazier where you've got none of the big favourites, but you just go with a kind of mass approach of trying to get as many people in the top 10. But I would say, yeah, it's pretty brave to not go with Poggi or Evenepoel. I'd say please take at least one of them. That's probably the safest thing to do. But let me know what you're thinking in the comment section down below. What teams are you thinking of going with? Are you thinking of going with how many of the big 3 are you going to go with? That sort of stuff. And yeah, put it all in the comment section down below. I'll try and get this video up. I don't know what the internet speed is like, so fingers crossed this is going to not just crash the Wi-Fi. And yeah, all is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Salut.